Hi, my name's Nick Adams. I'm the Commercial Director for Alltech's Technology Group globally, and just want to give you a quick update as to what we've seen over this past year when we think about mycotoxins around the world, but particularly in Latin America, North America, because we've seen a sort of moderate risk when we think about mycotoxins, particularly when we're focusing on grain, on maize, and predominantly we see mycotoxins from the Fusarium family. We're measuring those using two different methods, particularly in Latin America, where we're using our 37 plus system, which is based on mass spectrometry, and we can test the 54 different mycotoxins. Also, we can test locally in country using what we call RAPI-Read, and that's testing using lateral flow devices where we can test for up to 6 mycotoxins. So between those two tests, we get a good overview of mycotoxin contamination around the world. And again, particularly in Latin America, where we have grain primarily coming from Brazil, Argentina, as well as from North America, we're concerned about the Fusarium mycotoxin family. So we're thinking about the DON group, we're thinking about fumonisins, we're thinking about T2, we're thinking about zearalenone. And over this past year, we would say that we've seen a moderate risk. Yes, there's some lower risk, but we've seen a lot of samples in the moderate risk, with then also some in the higher risk. So on average, we see around 8 mycotoxins in each sample that we test using 37 plus. If we compare the two systems, what do we see? And it's important because when we're using those lateral flow devices locally, they're very good to give us that initial simple overview of quality of grain. We're testing probably for somewhere between 3 and 6 mycotoxins in a quality control program. When we compare the results that we see locally with the results that we see using 37 plus, it's important that we think about the concept of underestimation, so sub-estimation of mycotoxin risk. And we can see that might be up to 40%, whereby the risk we see using the LFDs might be up to 40% underestimated when we compare with the risk that we measure with 37 plus. Because as we test more mycotoxins, we get a better understanding of risk. We're testing the emerging mycotoxins, for example. We're testing other Aspergillus, other Penicillium mycotoxins, and they all contribute to risk overall. And so when we think about our REQ system, it's our risk equivalent quantity system, all of those other groups of mycotoxins contribute to that risk. And so, as I said, when we're thinking about testing for 2 or 3 mycotoxins, really good because they're the key mycotoxins, but we've got to consider the bigger picture, and that's where 37 plus comes in. And that concept of thinking about underestimation. And that's where the Alltech system, the data that we have, we can help clients understand that for a particular region, for a particular grain, for a particular season or year. The system that we have created is very much based on understanding the risk through the analysis process, interpreting that risk using REQ so that we can take all of those individual mycotoxins and give back one risk number, right? So that simplifies the interpretation of risk. What we can then do is say, for this species, for this life stage, this is the level of risk, and then on the back of that, make the best recommendation for the right technology, the right product to help mitigate that risk. And so We have a family of products that have been developed around mitigating different levels of risk, always looking at a broad spectrum of risk, but different levels of risk for different species and life stages. And so on that basis, depending on what we're seeing from the analysis, what we're seeing in the field, putting those things together, being able to recommend the right product at the right inclusion level based on the research that we have done for that particular situation. And over the past 3 years now, we've been able to take a lot of our studies across different species, and we've produced different meta-analyses. So we have produced one for broilers, one for layers and breeders in the last 3 years. And so that's a great way that we've been able to go back across all of our individual studies, summarize those into a meta-analysis. And that again has been really helpful to allow us to help us to determine at which different mycotoxin risk levels do our products function when we're thinking about that commercial environment. So as a program, identifying the risk, quantifying the risk through the interpretation, and then providing the best mitigation strategy based on 25 years of research, both in the laboratory and in the animals.